this is part two. If you did not see part one, you definitely need to see part one before we go on, because in part one I tried to lay out the forest instead of the trees. Now um, I made 10 different videos and realized that I needed to go back and start at the very beginning. So I did part one of the beginning, and this is part two. And in part one, I established what I call loosely the Moses model. That is how the Bible was written, the first five books of the Bible. First five books of the Bible written by Moses. The Bible is very clear in that Moses was educated in Egypt. Acts chapter 7 and verse 22 says, and Moses was educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians. This is a reference to the Egyptian, what they often call the mystery system. The Christian myth has been that Moses's, even though he was educated in Egypt, he spent 40 years as a shepherd, and he unlearned his Egyptian education. Well, that sounds nice, but it's a myth. There's no Bible text to support that. And because it is a myth, we can test it. So we can look at these first five books of the Bible and find out whether or not there are any Egyptian elements. That is indeed the test. So this Moses model is the original model. All of the Bible writers will follow in Moses's shoes. They will write in connection to Moses. How they understood everything is in accordance with Moses' law. This is why all throughout the Bible, you hear them talk about the law. They're not talking about the law of the United States. They're talking about the law of Moses. Anytime the Bible says the law, it's referring to the law of Moses. So the entire Bible is based on Moses's ideas and understanding. And the question we need to ask, if we're going to talk about the original model, is indeed, what was Moses's original model, and how much of it has to do with ancient Egypt? Now, as I said in part one, that Alexander is the change. Now we are in part two, and part two is that by the time we reach the New Testament, when John closes the book of Revelations, we now have the early church. The early church is in the midst of the Roman Empire. That means that everybody who is contributing to the development of the Bible and how to understand the Bible are people who have grown up, been educated in whatever form in the Roman world. And the Roman world is basically fundamentally the Greek ideology, the Greek philosophy, the Greek foundation, Western civilization's foundation. So all of the people putting these things together are based in the ideas of Rome and Greece. These are foreign ideas. These people who are with the seven councils, Nicaea, the Council of Constantinople, the Council of Ephesus, all of these councils that are coming together are still based in this Greek and Roman ideologies. Now, the people who are developing these ideas in theology, these people are not claiming to be inspired by God. They are simply theologians, believers, people who say we need to establish many of our ideas and beliefs and what the meaning of Jesus' sacrifice was. Now, most of the ideas of the early church and all of the councils, those are easily accessible. The next phase of what we're going to talk about is not so easily accessible, because now we start with the issue of racism. This next phase in talking about how biblical interpretation has developed begins with, of all places, the death of the prophet Muhammad. When Muhammad dies, Islam starts to spread. When they come over into Africa, there is indeed a ripe ground for the religion of Islam. There were many reasons for this. ideas of brotherhood, bringing many ethnic groups together, the idea of trade, making money, and things like that. The religion was simple, unlike Christianity, which was very complicated. Um, and so Islam was very simple, and therefore it was something easily understood. Islam spreads all over Africa, and it finds a very, very ripe ground to grow in. And so much of Africa is converted to Islam. One of the key points here is that as they are uniting and as they're coming together, the Muslims combined with the Africans, they take over African Egypt. This is a very crucial point because after they take over Egypt, they translate a lot of documents, a lot of ideas, including Greek ideas. They actually translate books from Greece, and so they move all throughout Africa, especially North Africa. And a key group of people are the Garamantes. The Garamantes they constitute a major force in this Islamic movement. They move over all the way to the west, to the Morocco area. And then in 711 AD, you have the Africans and the Arabs. They contemplate an attack on Europe. They move over and they conquer Spain, Portugal, Italy, and part of France. And therefore, once they conquer these places, all of the knowledge that they had accumulated in Africa, especially the documents from Egypt, they start to infuse these documents into Europe. Christianity, it was already adopted by Europe, but the Muslims, in their desire to understand Islam and their desire to understand Christianity, they start a Bible translation program. And so there's a lot of scholarship that goes into the translation of Bibles into many different languages throughout Europe. But Arabic is one of the major languages that they are using. During this time, the Muslims also reintroduce Greek ideas back into Europe, and they give further explanation of what the Greeks meant. The Muslims were very concerned. They were very interested in Aristotle's work. This is very important. Once they start to retranslate Bible, they start to apply Aristotle's ideas to the biblical text. And so many texts were given a Greek understanding and a Islamic understanding. So both of these are foreign elements. This is what we're saying here. We are saying that they're going further away from this original Moses model. And we are getting further and further away from the original understanding, the original way it was intended, all because these are foreign elements now going into the understanding of the biblical text. The Moors and the Arabs, they actually adopt many of the Greek ideas, but they adopt these Greek ideas through the lens of the religion of Islam. So you have a lot of famous Moorish philosophers who give their comments to the biblical text. There are many famous ones like Al-Tabari, Averroes. Averroes is very famous, his contribution. Al-Razi, he's also very famous. Then you also have coming into this Jewish elements. You have Maimonides. Rabbi Moses ben Maimonides is one of the most famous of all scholars of the Middle Ages because he is Jewish and he is giving an interpretation of Moses's work or Judaism in general. Now, even though he's a Jewish rabbi, he studied at the University of Fez. The University of Fez is an Islamic university, so even in his Jewish scholarship, there is an Islamic lens that is actually part of his paradigm. So as we can see that so much of what the Moors, we do not have time to get into all of the contributions of the Moors. The Moors' contribution is very difficult to access. There's a lot of scholarship that is being done on trying to recover this history, because here's the deal. When the Moors were finally defeated in 1492, the same year that Columbus sailed to America from Spain, that's not an accident. When the Moors were defeated, after they were defeated, the Spanish, and indeed many of the countries that had been subjected to Moorish rule for 800 years, they went on a campaign to stamp out the African Moors' influence. So therefore, we don't know very much about it. We're not taught it in school. We know very little about the Moors and what they did for Europe. It is hard to overstress how primitive Europe was at that time and how much that the African Moors gave to Europe. So they have systematically tried to wipe it out of history, but now there's now an attempt to rediscover all that the Moors contributed in the way of civilization in general. However, here we are talking about the Moorish contribution to biblical studies, how they understood the biblical text. The story of the Islamic contribution to Bible scholarship has never been told. That story has never been told. And because it has never been told, we now do not understand exactly what all has gone into our understanding of the biblical text. Once again, the Islamic contribution to biblical scholarship is still a foreign element. Next, we're going to talk about where this is going to lead. After the Moorish contribution to biblical scholarship, then we are going to talk about in part 3, the Age of Enlightenment. And the Age of Enlightenment is when we, in the West, put in our modern understanding of the biblical text. Once we install the understanding of the biblical text, then you have an incredible avalanche of Protestant denominations. Martin Luther will make his break from the Catholic Church, and then you have a lot of Protestant denominations that will come about. And so we have now thousands of denominations, all based in the foreign interpretation of the biblical text. Now, once we lay out all this, what we're going to do is go back and talk about what the original model, Moses's model, really is. But first, we have to go through and we have to get everybody to take a look at the ideas of just how much foreign elements have come into biblical scholarship.